The 19th of February, 2026, Buckingham Palace moved with a rare decisiveness. This morning, a statement echoed across global media. No member of the British royal family, past or present, shall be commercially leveraged without the sovereign's consent. Any marital agreement attempting to license royalty for profit would be reviewed, challenged, and if necessary, publicly invalidated. Beneath the constitutional language lay a more personal revelation, one involving Princess Anne and Lady Louise Windsor, who had been quietly investigating the marriage contract between Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. Their focus centered on a single, deeply controversial provision insiders refer to as page 14, clause 7. Before we begin today's royal update, I want to take a quick moment. Many of you watch these videos but haven't subscribed yet, and you don't want to miss the latest developments and fascinating stories from the world of royalty. Subscribing is completely free and keeps you up to date as everything unfolds. And while you're here, let us know, where are you watching from? Share it in the comments. It's wonderful to see viewers joining us from around the world. What did it contain? Sources granted access under royal emergency privilege confirm. Clause 7 gave Meghan Markle full intellectual property control over Harry's personal narrative. Books, interviews, documentaries, dramatizations, even fictionalized retellings could not proceed without her written approval. Most striking, Prince Harry reportedly signed it without independent legal counsel. Earlier this month, Princess Anne presented her findings to King Charles and Prince William at Clarence House. Calm yet devastating, her words framed the issue bluntly. This was not a marital agreement, it was architecture for control. She doesn't just own the house, she owns his past, she owns his silence. Lady Louise, increasingly influential in court affairs, confirmed the magnitude. Meghan's commercial empire depended on Harry's legacy, trauma, and identity. The history was chillingly familiar. In her 2013 divorce from Hollywood producer Trevor Engelson, Meghan had dismantled all financial ties with precision, leaving nothing unresolved. Analysts called it surgical. Now with Harry, the stakes were global, historical, and monumental. Documents reviewed by the Palace Legal Advisory Board revealed Meghan had re-engaged Sunshine Sachs, a PR firm known for high-profile divorce management. The same team had orchestrated quiet exits for celebrities, turning private separations into public victories. Princess Anne framed it starkly. This was premeditated narrative warfare. Reputation management was the tip, legal containment the foundation. Even more alarming, intimate footage of Harry's most vulnerable moments, filmed for Netflix, was reportedly captured not to amplify his voice, but to fortify Meghan's legal leverage. Clause 11C, buried in their 2020 Netflix agreement, granted her editorial control over all post-dissolution material. Footage, behind-the-scenes recordings, interviews, unpublished family moments. The Crown realized it was witnessing the weaponization of narrative itself. Clause 7 now fully exposed, the monarchy transitioned from concern to active containment. Confidential memos outlined Harry's legal risks: loss of Montecito estate if classified as shared property, forfeiture of his Arowell stake, diminished custodial leverage over Archie and Lilith, and a near-total block on publishing any content tied to his royal past. Worse, Clause 7 might prevent him from defending himself publicly. Meanwhile, Anne and Louise traced financial breadcrumbs, charting Meghan's methodical separation of brand assets and media control from Harry's name. The revelations were staggering. By 2022, Meghan had fully extracted her identity, revenue, and trademarks from joint ventures. American Riviera Orchard, her lifestyle brand, launched through a Delaware LLC. Harry's name did not appear on filings. Podcast deals, internal Arkwell restructuring, and media content rerouting cemented her control. By December 2023, Harry was effectively absent from the operation that depended entirely on him. Anne discovered that even Harry's memoir, Spare, had undergone revisions approved by Meghan's legal team. Any future writing or content creation required her consent. Children's books, mental health podcasts, fictionalized dramatizations, every potential narrative required pre-approval. Palace aides described him as a hostage to his own memories. Financially, the structure was equally precarious. Bridge loans on Montecito, foreign shell companies, and aggressive interest rates were poised to trigger foreclosure. Auditors flagged irregularities in charitable and operational expenses, further complicating refinancing. Archwell's media pipeline, Netflix documentaries, podcasts, and global content, was effectively frozen. Harry's autonomy, both personal and commercial, was systematically eroded. The Crown acted decisively. Catherine invoked the Windsor Protection Protocol, shielding Archie and Lilith, and revoked genealogical privileges. The monarchy began vaulting sensitive media, securing biometric assets, and preparing legal frameworks to reclaim narrative authority. Meanwhile, Meghan's Montecito estate fell silent. Her PR team issued no statements, and scheduled media appearances quietly vanished. By February 16, the palace had moved beyond defensive postures. A sovereign decree of narrative reclamation was enacted. Any post-marital endeavor seeking to capitalize on Harry's life or legacy would require Crown approval. It was unprecedented. The monarchy was not punishing, it was asserting sovereignty, protecting legacy, identity, and memory. Harry, isolated at Windsor, began reviewing contracts, guided by Lady Louise. One whispered exchange captured the personal stakes. "If I lost my story, do I still exist in theirs?" Louise's answer. "Not if you don't reclaim it." For the first time, a glimmer of hope pierced the shadow of Clause 7. The story, the legacy, and Harry's voice were all on the line, and the Crown was determined to restore what had been appropriated. By the evening of February 18, the royal website quietly published a statement. "A story doesn't belong to those who write it, it belongs to those who live it." For Harry, Clause 7 would no longer dictate the narrative. The monarchy had reclaimed sovereignty, and the Windsor firewall had been established. The game had begun, and the stakes could not have been higher. The days following the decree were tense, almost electric. February 20th, 2026, Clarence House moved like a war room. Every line of communication, every media feed, every legal brief was scrutinized for leaks or vulnerabilities. Princess Anne convened a closed session with Lady Louise and Prince William. The dossier, once theoretical, had become a living threat. Clause 7 was not simply an obstacle. It was a blueprint of control, a map of Harry's silence and marginalization. Inside the palace, analysts traced Meghan's moves with near-military precision. Every corporate filing, every media release, every public appearance was cross-referenced. Patterns emerged: delayed payments, strategic rebranding, selective publicity. Each maneuver was not just business, it was premeditated leverage. Lady Louise observed, "This isn't opportunistic. This is strategy layered on strategy, decades of control condensed into a single clause." Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, Montecito fell under a quieter, more insidious scrutiny. The estate's gates were shuttered, security tight, yet whispers traveled through insider channels. Sunshine Sachs, Meghan's PR powerhouse, had gone dark, but not inactive. Sources revealed back-channel communications aimed at influencers, streaming platforms, and boutique publishers. Every narrative, every angle was being preemptively engineered to align with Meghan's editorial prerogative. By February 21, palace aides noted a disturbing trend: financial maneuvers disguised as charitable initiatives, including misclassified tax credits and expense reallocations. Auditors warned that any misstep could trigger default on multiple loans simultaneously, compounding Harry's vulnerability. The Montecito bridge loan, already under scrutiny, was now a potential trigger point for a domino effect. Analysts called it the slow burn trap: assets that appeared stable on the surface, but ready to implode under strategic pressure. On the narrative front, Clause 11C, the Netflix editorial provision, was now being tested in real time. Internal sources confirmed that several unreleased documentaries had been quietly shelved, not for quality or content, but because the legal framework allowed Meghan unilateral veto power. Harry's voice, once amplified through Archwell, was systematically muted. Every attempt to publish or broadcast, even limited podcast episodes or personal essays, risked legal counteraction. The Crown's legal team labeled it a narrative straitjacket. At Windsor, Harry absorbed the depth of the threat. Discussions with Lady Louise and the legal reform team uncovered another layer: intellectual property not merely confined to content, but extending to derivative works, fiction, dramatizations, even hypothetical scenarios. Every aspect of Harry's life, past and future, was potentially controlled, commoditized, or erased. He asked quietly, "Do they own my memories too?" Louise's reply was chilling but precise. Not if we intercept first. But time is the weapon here, and they move faster than the clock. The palace responded with urgency. February 22, 2026, saw the initiation of a multi-tier containment strategy. Biometric vaulting of media extended beyond children's images to archival footage of hairy, unedited interviews and home recordings. Every item was cataloged, encrypted, and indexed to prevent unauthorized use or AI replication. Legal contingencies were drafted to anticipate potential U.S. court challenges, given California's community property laws. The monarchy moved as if engaged in cyber-physical chess. Every defensive position had a counter, every potential exploit preempted. The public remained largely unaware of the depths of the escalation. Meghan continued selective media engagements, carefully curated appearances that maintained the veneer of calm. Analysts noted an eerie synchrony, releases coinciding with legal deadlines, PR signals perfectly aligned with contractual windows. It was the hallmark of exit strategy warfare, calculated, patient, unrelenting. Inside Buckingham Palace, the tension was almost tangible. Legal memos traced every potential pathway of financial erosion, custodial influence, and narrative control. Foreclosures, content freezes, and trademark implications were mapped like topography. Every scenario projected potential collapse or leverage. Princess Anne's words during a late-night briefing resonated. "We're not chasing shadows. The shadows are moving, and they're ahead." By February 23, the stakes escalated further. An internal memo warned that Archwell's international assets, UAE trademarks, Singapore licenses, and Delaware LLC holdings could be leveraged to deny Harry access, not just financially but narratively. Every press release, every philanthropic event, every social media post was now a tactical consideration. The Palace Legal Board termed it preemptive institutional warfare. Meanwhile, Harry began reclaiming small but vital ground. Confidential briefings outlined the potential for sovereign override, a loophole never before exercised. Each discussion, each strategy session was designed to dismantle Clause 7's authority piece by piece, from narrative to IP to financial leverage. For the first time, he realized the fight was not merely for property or voice, it was for existence. Without reclaiming narrative control, he risked becoming a ghost in his own life. By evening, whispers in media circles suggested tension at Montecito. Staff departures, sudden cancellations, and silent estates created an atmosphere of quiet siege. Meanwhile, Clarence House escalated operational security. Surveillance of financial filings, public appearances, and digital footprints intensified. Each move was mapped, anticipated, and countered. The palace wasn't reacting. It was orchestrating containment on multiple levels: legal, financial, and psychological. By February 24, the chessboard was set. Meghan controlled content, finances, and narrative. The monarchy controlled legal infrastructure, media safeguards, and protective oversight. Harry stood in the middle, his options narrow but not non-existent. For the first time, the Crown recognized that preemption, speed, and strategic foresight were the only way to reclaim what had been ceded. Clause 7 had been more than a threat. It was a ticking mechanism, a machine poised to redefine loyalty, ownership, and legacy. The palace prepared for the coming confrontation, knowing that the next moves would not just decide ownership of content or assets. They would determine who controlled the story of a prince, a family, and a legacy. February 25, 2026. The atmosphere at Windsor and Clarence House had taken on a rare, electric chill. What began as quiet audits and back-channel investigations had escalated into full-scale operational coordination. Princess Anne, Prince William, and Lady Louise were no longer observers. They were commanders of a multi-front institutional strategy. Every brief, every document, every communication line was now a potential battlefield. Clause 7 was no longer theoretical. It was active, a live mechanism controlling the flow of narrative, reputation, and influence. Meanwhile, Montecito was a fortress in stealth mode. Meghan Markle's staff had gone silent, but sources revealed that Sunshine Sachs continued to orchestrate unseen movements. Media narratives were being tested, influencers prepped, and content flagged for legal pre-approval before even conceptualization. Every faux, every quote, every minor anecdote was a calculated probe, testing weaknesses in Harry's visibility and leverage. Analysts noted that this wasn't just influence, it was operational manipulation at scale. By mid-morning, Clarence House received an urgent briefing. Financial documents indicated potential default triggers on 2 key loans and multiple pre-existing liabilities. The bridge loan, already under high scrutiny, could accelerate foreclosure timelines, while overseas LLC holdings were vulnerable to unilateral control by MEGHAN. Legal advisors highlighted an unsettling pattern. Assets reclassified as premarital intellectual property funneled through offshore trusts, and archival media locked behind Clause 11C, all leaving Harry exposed. The advisors referred to it as a strategic vacuum, where visibility existed, but agency did not. The palace's media monitoring team had noticed a subtle escalation as well. Press releases from American outlets were suddenly coordinated, almost eerily precise. Phrases emphasizing supporting spouse, co-parenting, and narrative partnership appeared across multiple platforms, synchronizing with contractual timelines. Legal analysts concluded that Meghan's team was effectively pre-staging public perception to match contractual leverage, ensuring that any challenge by Harry could be framed as self-serving or destabilizing. This was not PR, it was kinetic media warfare. As the afternoon unfolded, Harry's counsel presented a confidential analysis of potential recourse. Sovereign override, rarely invoked, could provide a pathway, but the mechanism required speed, precision, and absolute legal clarity. Each day delayed allowed Clause 7 to calcify, extending Meghan's editorial control and financial leverage. Lady Louise emphasized the urgency. Every hour is now a legal expiration window. He must move before the machinery fully locks. In Montecito, the tension mirrored the palace. Sunshine Sachs had quietly canceled internal content launches, shifted production schedules, and advised selective silence across social channels. Every signal projected stability, yet insiders noted subtle psychological pressure. The estate was isolated, staff turnover abrupt, and public messaging carefully choreographed to project calm while constraining Harry's options. Analysts described it as covert perimeter control, an operational design to limit mobility without overt confrontation. By evening, the palace deployed its most audacious measure yet. Biometric archival vaulting extended beyond children and sensitive media to include Harry's private recordings, interviews, and unreleased communications. Every item was encrypted, indexed, and cataloged to prevent unauthorized use. Legal teams drafted conditional clauses allowing the Crown to assert narrative guardianship in case of any post-divorce claims. This was more than preemption. It was proactive reclamation. Across the Atlantic, Harry began to internalize the scope of his predicament. Clause 7 and associated provisions were more than legal text. They were instruments of systemic exclusion. His voice, his story, his influence had been incrementally eroded under the guise of joint ownership and marital partnership. The realization was stark. If unchallenged, Meghan could dictate his public and private narrative for years. Yet, for the first time, he began to see pathways forward. Reclamation, he understood, required strategic patience, precision counsel, and the support of the Crown's legal authority. As night fell, the palace convened a high-level operational summit. Intelligence briefings, financial audits, media simulations, and narrative control assessments were presented. Every potential move by Meghan's team had been mapped, every risk scenario evaluated. Princess Anne's voice carried calm steel. This is no longer just a domestic matter. Clause 7 represents institutional exposure. Our priority is to neutralize control, restore agency, and protect lineage. We act now or risk legacy loss. The following morning, February 26, 2026, the convergence became evident. Every legal path, every financial maneuver, every media signal was part of a single chessboard spanning continents. Meghan's control over content, finances, and narrative was significant, but so was the Crown's capacity to intervene decisively. Analysts described the moment as critical inflection, the precise juncture at which preemption, speed, and sovereign authority could reclaim the story. Every second counted, and the machinery of Clause 7 waited silently, a ticking instrument capable of permanently shaping Harry's autonomy. By late afternoon, Harry received a confidential debrief. Every contract signed since 2020 had been reviewed, financial exposures quantified, narrative vulnerabilities mapped. For the first time, the Crown presented a unified counter-strategy: reclaim rights over media, neutralize unauthorized IP control, secure custodial recognition, and preempt future narrative manipulation. The plan was audacious, legally robust, and operationally intricate, essentially a multi-layered assault on Clause 7's authority without public confrontation. As night descended, Montecito remained quiet. Social media feeds showed curated calm, but internal sources described tension and apprehension. Sunshine Sachs, aware of palace actions, reportedly escalated internal contingency measures. Legal notices circulated quietly among distribution partners. The stage was set. The chessboard was aligned. The next moves would determine not just ownership of story or assets, but the control of a prince's voice, a family's legacy, and the delicate balance between celebrity influence and sovereign authority. Clause 7 had become the fulcrum. The coming confrontation would be decisive, and neither side could afford miscalculation. February 28, 2026. Dawn at Windsor carried an unusual hush, as if the estate itself anticipated the moment of reckoning. Behind closed doors, King Charles, Princess Anne, Prince William, and Lady Louise convened with the Sovereign Legal Advisory Board. All threads of Clause 7, Archewell corporate maneuvers, Montecito finance entanglements, and narrative control had been traced, cataloged, and analyzed. The briefing table resembled a war room. Contracts stacked, red-line timelines, biometric media logs, and confidential memos formed a perimeter around every conceivable risk. By mid-morning, the palace had enacted a decisive maneuver. A formal legal notice was dispatched to Meghan Markle's council, citing the sovereign override clause, the royal prerogative of narrative guardianship, and newly ratified provisions restricting commercial exploitation of any royal-derived content. The notice was precise, unambiguous, and legally binding. The Crown asserted control over all media referencing Harry's royal life, including unpublished works, interviews, podcasts, dramatizations, and social media content. A single line carried extraordinary weight. Any attempt to bypass this sovereign declaration would be met with immediate legal and financial action. Across the Atlantic, Montecito felt the seismic shift. Sources reported Meghan received the notice late in the afternoon, reportedly in private, escorted by a legal team whose expressions betrayed concern. Sunshine Sachs, her usual shield, was now reduced to damage control, quiet, urgent, and reactive. The estate, once orchestrated for influence projection, fell into calculated silence. Every planned content release, interview, and media engagement was suspended indefinitely. Analysts described it as a strategic paralysis, a high-level containment executed without public spectacle. Simultaneously, Windsor intelligence confirmed that Prince Harry had regained agency over personal media. Clause 11C, narrative rights transfer upon dissolution, was legally nullified under the Crown's sovereign authority. Biometric vaulting of home videos, unpublished interviews, and archival recordings ensured that no unauthorized distribution could occur. His memoir rights, previously under Meghan's control, were now safeguarded for potential future publication, subject to Crown oversight but free from unilateral suppression. Legal experts called it unprecedented, a modern reclamation of personal narrative within a royal framework. By early evening, public signals began. The official royal, UK page published a statement in neutral, declarative prose. The Crown maintains sovereign authority over all narrative content derived from members of the royal family, past and present. Any contractual or commercial arrangement attempting to restrict or monetize such content without sovereign ratification is hereby null and void. Social media erupted. Hashtags such as Clause 7 voided, Take Back the Story, Windsor Firewall trended globally. News outlets framed the move as both protective and revolutionary. The monarchy had asserted authority over celebrity-style contracts, safeguarding legacy and lineage. In Montecito, Meghan Markle remained publicly silent. Behind the scenes, aides were reportedly assessing options, legal pathways, and media contingencies. Observers noted subtle shifts. Previously aggressive legal maneuvers were replaced by calculated discretion, signaling acknowledgement of the palace's unassailable position. Analysts described it as a strategic pivot, from active control to damage limitation, every move now filtered through legal necessity rather than ambition. At Windsor, a quieter but deeply symbolic act took place. Prince Harry, escorted by Lady Louise, reviewed every personal contract and media agreement since 2020. He marked the documents, signing amendments under Crown supervision that reclaimed control while preserving legal integrity. In a private corridor, he reportedly whispered to Anne, "I never realized how much I'd lost in my own story." She replied, steady and deliberate, "Now you hold it, but only because you respect what it represents." The moment carried gravitas beyond legal strategy. It was the restoration of voice, identity, and autonomy. By nightfall, all institutional measures were operational. Archewell's media, IP, and corporate holdings were under provisional Crown oversight, neutralized from unilateral exploitation. Montecito finance and intellectual property exposure were contained. Clause 7, once a tool of coercion, had been legally neutralized. Archival footage, memoirs, and personal narratives were secured, and any attempted public or commercial use without authorization would trigger immediate enforcement. The monarchy had achieved containment, reclamation, and precedent simultaneously. The final public act came quietly but powerfully. Princess Catherine, accompanied by George, Charlotte, and Lilith, stood at a London Children's Advocacy Center. Cameras captured a single wide shot, no questions allowed. A caption was posted on the Royal UK page. "A story does not belong to those who write it, it belongs to those who live it." The line resonated globally. Symbolically, the monarchy had drawn the boundary between personal agency, legacy, and commercial exploitation. Harry, once a narrative hostage, was now free to reclaim his life, his voice, and his role within the institution. Meghan, while still influential, could no longer weaponize the past to control the present. As Westminster Abbey bells rang into the night, the Crown's firewall had held. Clause 7 was nullified, narrative sovereignty restored, and the monarchy had demonstrated with unprecedented decisiveness that legacy cannot be rented, borrowed, or coerced. The stage was set for the future. Harry reclaimed autonomy. The royal lineage remained protected. The institutional lesson was clear. The final scene was silent yet absolute. In this story of contracts, power, and legacy, the Crown had emerged not in scandal, but in sovereignty. The page belonged to those who lived it, not those who wrote it.